Something felt so off and I couldn't explain it. But I knew that continuing down as a lawyer and actually finishing this law degree and becoming a qualified practicing lawyer, it didn't sit well with me. So after 1 year, I submitted the withdrawal form on the website. There was a part of me that really wanted to create content that touched me the same way that other person's content touched me. I wanted to do something like that. But I also knew that content has a potential to help accelerate someone's business.
Welcome to Before We Get There, the podcast where we explore people's journeys, how they got to where they are, what keeps them pushing forward, and where they eventually want to get to. I'm your host, Nicholas Braman, and today I'm joined by Cheryl Lau. Cheryl is a prolific podcaster and content creator, business coach, and entrepreneur. She was always a high-flying academic achiever until she made the tough choice to quit graduate school, not once, but twice, as she realized she wanted something else out of life. We discuss her recent podcast rebrand, the story of how she quit school to become an entrepreneur, how her business has evolved over the years, and much more.
Nicholas, I'm so excited for this. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I think first I've mentioned it a couple of times, both on the podcast and then to you outside of it. It was the episode that I did with you that sparked my idea to have this podcast. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm so delighted that our conversation for my podcast it played a role in this show that exists now that everyone's listening to. So very exciting.
I mentioned on the episode, you actually asked me if I had any plans of new projects coming up or anything I wanted to do. And I was like, no, I don't think there's anything in the near future. And then there was just this little bug in the back of my head that was like, you know what, this is something you should try to do. So it's been fun. But your podcast is actually going through some changes right now. Maybe you can share with the listeners about what you're doing and how that just got started.
So at this moment, at this very second of recording, my new podcast has yet to be released yet, but in the next few weeks, it will be live. The new podcast is called Edit History, and it is a show where successful entrepreneurs and creators come to the show and they basically revisit and review and maybe even roast some of their past content pieces. And the rationale for why I wanted this particular show concept is because for a lot of us who are creating content online, we oftentimes look back at our work from a year ago, 6 months ago, and we just cringe, right? And I wanted to show that no matter where you are in your business or creator journey, we all inevitably will mature as creators and entrepreneurs, and it is inevitable that we will get better and better at this craft of content creation. So I wanted to show that it is very natural to, at some point, make mistakes in your content, to look back and think, oh, I wish I didn't do that, or I would not do that today. And so that is the idea behind this new podcast that will be launched very soon.
That sounds super exciting. How did you come up with the idea? Has it been like you've been pondering it for a while, or did you want to make a change and then you tried to think of the best fit, or did this just come about fully fledged?
I think for some context for the audience, so I have been podcasting for over 4 years now before I am now embarking on this new rebrand of the show. So for the first 4 years, 80% of the show was solo monologue episodes where I'm just sharing my experiences, observations, things that I came up with. And that worked for 4 years. But what has started to happen in the past half a year or so was I started to realize, I think I personally, as a creator, hit a bit of a plateau where I honestly feel like if I wasn't putting myself in new situations or new learning and growth situations, then there's only so much I can offer on my own podcast to my listeners. And so I felt like it was the right time to revamp entirely the show format and show concept. So moving forward, actually, it would be maybe an 85-90% guest conversation style podcast. And then I will sprinkle in a solo episode maybe every 5 or 10 episodes here and there. And the reason is because I also want to learn from our guests. And I think that's why a lot of folks like to do guest interview style podcasts, because we want to talk to cool people. We want to learn as well. And I think I'm now embracing this era of my podcasts. But to the question of, was it something that I was mulling on? I would say it's been something that I thought about for a good 6 months. I had a feeling 6 months ago that something would change, but it did take a while to finally arrive at this show concept of having creators and entrepreneurs come and will dissect their old content pieces. So that took a while.
Yeah, that's definitely a big reason why I'm doing the podcast, because I want to talk to interesting people and learn more about them. So I totally see where you're coming from, but it's quite a big change for you to do so many guest interviews, which you obviously had as part of your podcast up until now. But as you mentioned, the solo episodes were a lot bigger part. So how is your feelings about making this change, both for yourself as the host, but also for your listeners and your audience?
I think as with many big changes, whether it be in our business or content or careers or just any big changes, there's a lot of, oftentimes, the reason why we're resistant to the change is because there's some sort of attachment. And for me, I was reluctant for a while. I had the idea for switching it to more of a guest conversation format for a while, but I was like, oh, do I really want to? Because I was so used to solo monologue episodes predominantly on my podcast. And I think the biggest reason I could identify was because I had this correlation in my head that when I'm the star of the show, let's just say, my listeners will see me as more of expertise, thought leadership. Like I felt like I had a bit of attachment there, where I had the fear of, if I was uplifting others alongside myself, then I wouldn't be seen as much of an expert anymore. So there was like this ego piece that I was clinging onto. But the reason why I ultimately made a decision to switch the format entirely to now guest conversations predominantly is because, Cheryl, you got to put your ego aside. Right now, you want to enter a stretch season for myself as a podcaster. I want to stretch and grow as a podcaster. And if I want to do that, I got to put my ego down and do things that might feel a little bit out of my comfort zone. That said, I have done guest conversations before on my podcast. I have interviewed other folks before, but it was just that ego in my head telling me, no, not a good idea. Stick to what you know. It's worked for 4 years, but hey, here we are.
No, that's really good that you were able to recognize that and then put that ego aside. I'm curious now that I think about it from a content creation perspective, since you were doing a lot of solo episodes, and you know now for podcasting, you've won awards, you've gone to speak and host panels at podcast conferences. What made you decide originally to have the format of a podcast rather than YouTube videos or other types of media?
That's a really good question, because when I first started my podcast in late 2020, most podcasts at the time were still audio only. Very few back in 2020 were video podcasts. Now in 2024, 2025, video podcasts are the mainstream way to do podcasting, or it's more expected now that a podcast means video and audio. But back then when I first started, I started off as a audio only podcast, and I did that for up until my 85th or 86, 87 episodes, somewhere around there. I only did audio. And the reason why I started with audio only at the time was because I needed to, I think practice, that's the word I'm looking for. I needed to practice it, because when I would do solo episodes, I would script out every single word that I'm going to say word for word, and then I would just read it out loud. So I wanted to practice using my voice and enunciating my words, expressing different emotions. And I think my public speaking skills naturally improved because I practiced only on using my voice. And then when I added on video, my voice was already pretty expressive. And then now I add on my hand gestures and facial expressions. right? I remember back when I was doing audio only, I needed to practice like opening up my chest and what's the word? It's like making my voice project my voice more.
Yeah.
So there were times when I'm recording audio only, I would literally put my hands on my head so my chest naturally opens up more and I would just read out my script. So there was a lot of different things I was trying to practice and experiment with just to practice using my voice. And then with time, I think I felt ready to add on the video elements. So I took the longer route to dive into video. But I think that was something that worked well for me was I practiced scripting my episodes, I practiced reading out my scripts, I practiced using my voice, and then finally I added on the video components.
And so were you a big listener of podcasts before you started your own?
I would say I'm basic in the sense that when I first started my podcast, I listened to predominantly entrepreneurship marketing podcasts. I have since then branched out to more diverse niches and topics of podcasts. But I was basic when I first started. I only stuck to one niche of podcasts that I listened to.
There's so many podcasts out there. There's a lot to choose from, and we only have so much time in the day. So I wanted to take a step back and talk about, because on this podcast, we like to dig into people's stories. And I know you could talk all day about content creation and podcasts and all this good info, but I really want to understand more about your story and how you got to where you are now. Maybe let's go back to when you were in school. And if I recall correctly, you've actually left we're studying twice and left two different programs. So can you share the story of how those happened?
So growing up, since high school and even throughout college, I was your stereotypical straight A 4.0 student. Very studious, went to the library every single day, got some awards and scholarships, did a lot of research assistant positions, so on and so forth. And when I graduated from college, I thought, okay, what other conventional metric of success career things can I do now? And somehow I arrived at law school. Somehow I applied, I got in, I even got a scholarship. And I went to a law school, a postgraduate law school in Hong Kong. And in my head, I thought, this is it. I'm going to be a lawyer. It's going to work out. But the problem very quickly arose when I started the internships during the first year of law school. And I realized, I could study, but now that I'm in the corporate environment, just as an intern, I dread it. I'm always looking at the clock. I don't like anything that I'm doing. Everyone has been really kind and nice and friendly. Like I wasn't even in a quote unquote toxic or really intense work environment. I was at an in-house law firm. And to already experience a lot of friction and dread to this relatively simple internship, I realized something is off and I couldn't quite pinpoint it at the time why I was feeling this way, but perhaps now that it's been years later, I have more language to explain why I felt that way. But at the time, something felt so off and I couldn't explain it. But I knew that continuing down as a lawyer and actually finishing this law degree and becoming a qualifying practicing lawyer, it didn't sit well with me. So after 1 year, I submitted the withdrawal form on the website. All it took was a click. I just clicked and then I was out of law school. And it was so simple. And my parents at the time were furious. Of course, they were immigrant parents. They brought me out. I was born in the US and they raised me over there and gave me all the opportunities and resources that I had. And they were so upset because I think to them, it felt like we gave you this upbringing, all these resources, you did fantastic, and you're just gonna quit? Like, we did not raise a quitter. And they even said that, right? They even said things like, you're such a quitter. Here are all the things in the past that you quit. You quit swimming, you quit chess. So they started naming all these things that I apparently quit. But it was a really rough time in my life just because of the family dynamic. And then fast forward a few years later, I started my PhD in Hong Kong as well. Because during that time span between law school and the PhD, I tried a number of things. I did research, I tutored, I taught English at a school. I became an assistant to a local coach. I did a lot of things just to explore. And I really loved the research job. So I ultimately decided to pursue a PhD with the same supervisor that I was working with during my research job. And I also started my podcast and my business during this time span. But when I first went into PhD, I remember when I first got that call because I was waitlisted at first. And then eventually the office called me and they're like, "You're admitted." And I bawled my eyes out because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I love my supervisor. I love the work that I'll be doing. I was genuinely so excited. It felt like the right fit. And to this day, I wonder if it was, I wondered if the circumstances didn't happen at the time, it would have still worked out. Because what happened was when I first accepted my offer, it was the beginning of COVID. It was March 2020 when COVID was first exploding in the world. And I thought, okay, this COVID thing's only going to last 4 months, 6 months. It's fine. So I accepted my offer and I started my PhD in August 2020. And by then, COVID was still here and it continued on and on. Ultimately, COVID got harder for me because my partner, my husband, and I were separated for 2 years. We were long distance. So it got to a point in 2022 when I decided the PhD, it wasn't the right timing. And so in 2022, I ultimately quit the PhD and moved to Singapore. So that is a long story short. I ended up quitting graduate school twice.
Thank you for sharing. I want to go back to a few points of that story. First of all, because I was going to ask while you were talking about quitting law school the first time, because you said something was off. You knew something wasn't right, but it was maybe hard to pin down or express exactly what that was. And so that made me think of as a child growing up and being forced to do activities that I didn't really want to do anymore. The Boy Scouts is one example that I did. I enjoyed it probably the first few years, but by the time I was 14 or so, 13 or 14, I wasn't enjoying it anymore. Studying piano is another one I enjoyed for a while, and then I didn't want to do it, and then I did end up quitting that one. But as a kid, you don't know if it's because you're lazy or you want to play video games or run around with your friends or do other kinds of activities, and your parents should know best what's good for you going forward. But then as you get older, I think there's plenty of hobbies and those sorts of activities that people quit all the time and they start doing and they enjoy for a while and then don't anymore, and it's not such a big deal. But as you said, quitting law school is very big in comparison to just studying piano or something like that. When your parents mentioned that you'd quit other activities before, did you have the same kind of feeling when you were doing those activities before you quit them? Do you remember from when you were younger?
As you were sharing that just now, I think what came up for me was, and this answers the question as well, is that whereas I think there's quitting because you feel like you aren't good at the thing. I think a lot of people quit something because they feel like I've been trying and I'm not getting any better, so it's not worth it anymore. And then there's also quitting where it feels like it really just isn't the right fit. And it's coming from a much more mature, grounded decision-making or headspace, I should say. And I think the reason why quitting law school felt, although I did not have the language at the time, now I think I have a better grasp of how I would explain it. But I felt like I identify as someone who, back then when I quit law school, I really identify as someone who has the work ethic to do well in academic environments, academic related things. I'm good. Like I will work my butt off to do well. And so it felt like such a weird identity clash for me to see that I wanted to give up on a academic related thing. At the time, I was so confused because I thought, no, I'm not someone who quits when things get hard in an academic environment. I will push through. Even if I get a B only, I'll still push through. So it was such a weird self-concept for me at the time. But now that years has passed and I have much more examples to reference, I can now see that the reason why I felt like quitting law school was the right decision was because now I can see that a big value of mine is doing work that I'm proud of. And that could be a podcast, that could be a business, that could be a career, that could be volunteering. But I can now see that it is very important to me to be doing things that I'm proud of. And for me, I just did not identify being a lawyer as a career that would make me proud. It wasn't the way I felt like my strengths and gifts would be best utilized. And that might have been a very naive thing to think back then, but I think now I have a lot more evidence to support that maybe it wasn't as naive as I thought. To the question, I think the reason why this felt different for me versus quitting swimming or quitting chess when I was younger was because those things I quit because I wasn't good. Like swimming, I was never that athletic anyway, so I quit because I wasn't getting any faster. I wasn't winning any swimming competitions or swim meets. But I think that was how I was able to delineate that there was something different between quitting law school versus quitting out of fear.
That's interesting. Right. And so that makes me curious because podcasting is something that you don't get a lot of feedback on. Even when your videos go on YouTube, you get maybe some comments and some likes, but it's not like you complete a task and you get fairly instant. This is how well you did on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, now, I did a good job. So did it take you getting used to just putting stuff out there into the world without getting that feedback?
I definitely am a podcaster where the numbers are not on my side. I have been podcasting for over 4 years now, and I wouldn't say I love my YouTube views or the number of podcast downloads I get on the back end of my audio platforms. I don't think they're particularly high. I think people think I have more numbers than they expect. But what has been immensely gratifying, despite not often getting the numbers I want, not even hearing from listeners that often, like maybe once every 4 months, I might hear something from someone. It's that when I do get a message from a very sincere message from someone, it's like, I gotta keep going. There's no choice. Like this podcast is bigger than me now. And there has been, I can picture people's faces right now. I can picture the exact faces of the particular people who have sent me messages, but have expressed how certain messages that I shared on the podcast or certain episodes or my stories have helped them make decisions in their own life. And the reason why that means a lot for me was because the reason why I started creating content online was because someone else, their content helped me at a time when I needed it the most. So when I was quitting law school about 7-8 years ago, there was a time when it felt like everyone around me, my classmates, my parents, everyone just did not understand my decision. And there was one day I was just on Instagram scrolling for no reason. And I saw a Instagram post from a complete stranger on the internet. And she was sharing her thought process of why she quit her fancy corporate job. And she shared her thought process, the things that she was experiencing, and how she's going to pick herself up and start and pursue new things from there. And it was exactly the right message I needed to see and hear at the right time. And I sent her a message. She was a stranger. I thanked her for sharing her story because it helped me. It gave me so much hope at a time when I felt like I had no hope. I could not give myself the hope. And so because someone else, simply by showing up on the internet, has helped me so profoundly, and it gave me the courage to eventually share as well on the internet, I now feel so strongly about sharing my own experiences online, and I want to encourage more people to do so because you really never know who your stories and messages will touch. You just have no idea.
That's cool. It's very fortuitous that you saw the post at the right time. So that must have been a challenging couple of years. Then after you quit school, you tried a variety of jobs, but were you like panicked trying to find something what to do, or did you take time to pause and plan out your next steps? What was that process like?
So the first time I quit graduate school, after I quit law school, because the situation, I was living with my family, my parents at the time in Hong Kong, because they were absolutely furious. I know that I needed to make money and support myself. Who knows? Like maybe they would kick me out, right? I did not know where their head was at the time. So I was a bit panicked in scrambling to look for work at the time. I applied for a lot of freelance part-time gigs as well as full-time research jobs because I had a lot of research experience from my college years. And I applied for 20-something, maybe close to 30 full-time jobs. I got 2 interviews, 1 offer. And I worked there for a couple of years, and it was a really great experience. I loved my research job there, so much so that I applied for a PhD at the same university with the same department with the same professor. And it just happened to work out, and I eventually was admitted as this professor's PhD student. So at that point in time, it was more of a scramble. Like, I need to look for work because I need to make money because I don't know if my parents are going to kick me out. That kind of energy. But then fast forward about 4 or 5 years later, when I decided to quit my PhD and move to Singapore, at that time, my business has been in operations for 3+ years now. And I had a lot of savings from my COVID years because I was growing my business during COVID. And I did not really spend money during those years. So I had a lot of savings from that time. And also my business was doing pretty well. It was doing well enough for me to feel secure to quit the PhD. Even though the PhD only gave you a small stipend, my business felt like it was at a good place to sustain me for the next few years and continue doing it full time. So right now, I have been continuing to do my business as my main career since 2022.
Cool. So let's go back to how you started the side hustle. Well, that was while you were at the research job.
Yes, so I did my full-time research job and I started the online coaching business and podcast as well.
So what kind of content were you creating before you started getting clients for the business?
I'm laughing because I still remember I had a podcast before 2020. I had one podcast which died. It was called like Quarter Life Project podcast, something like that, Quarter Life Project. So when I first started around 2018, I talked a lot about my quarter life crisis at the time. I even made a video on how to get straight A's in college. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it's on the internet anymore, but I created a lot of content based on what I knew at the time, which was quarter life crisis, navigating tough Asian parent conversations, career pivots, quitting law school. I made a lot of content around that when I first started on the internet around 2018. And then eventually I transitioned to more side hustle focused content because that was my lived experience at that particular juncture of my life. And then later on, it pivoted to more thought leadership because I really wanted to explore my own thoughts and interpretations of this concept. So I would say every season of my content journey reflected the lived experiences, the things that were so top of mind for me at the time.
That's cool. Yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to start off with the topics you know. So when you started creating with your first podcast and other content, was it because you wanted to connect with other people that were going through similar things, or at that time were you like, no, I need to start a side hustle and make some income and create another income stream, so let's do this?
I think both. I think that the honest answer is I think there's a bit of both. I think there was a part of me that really wanted to create content that touched me the same way that other person's content touched me. I wanted to do something like that. But I also knew that content has a potential to help accelerate someone's business. So that's why I saw my content, whether it's a podcast or Instagram content, I saw it as twofold. On one hand, I wanted it to be a body of work that gives value to other people and that I'm proud to share with others. But at the same time, hey, if it grows a business, then it grows my business.
Another topic I wanted to ask you about, which I think you've talked about before, but that is imposter syndrome. And as someone, again, who is building your business at the same time as being a content creator and sharing your journey and your lessons, how have you dealt with that? Have you felt it? First of all, have you felt imposter syndrome? And then how have you dealt with it?
I think for a lot of us, we feel like unless we are top of the top, unless we're 20 years of experience in one particular thing, unless we have a PhD in XYZ, unless we have XYZ under our belt, we're not qualified enough or even deserving, or it's not even right for us to talk about XYZ. That is something that I definitely have grappled with because I definitely grew up in environments where traditional benchmarks are celebrated, right? Whether it's like, oh, this person works at this fancy bank, or they have a PhD and MD combined, MD, PhD. I grew up in environments where a lot of things were, certain things, standard metrics of career success were very celebrated. And so I thought that because I did not have XYZ things under my belt, I'm not even in a deserving position to share anything on the internet. I definitely experienced that. Although 95% of my brain wants to cling on to Cheryl, you have no place. It's not your place to say anything on the internet. There is still that 5% of me clinging onto that one experience back in law school when a stranger's story on the internet touched me so much. And I didn't know her qualifications at the time. I didn't know what professional experience she has, but it was something about her perspective and her story and her lived experiences that helped me so much. And perhaps it's that naivete, that the audacity to just share it, right? I think that 5% in me was enough to at least try. And I think that's one thing that has been resonant for me throughout the years is at least, even if things feel out of my comfort zone, if I feel not qualified to do it, at least I will still try. I'll still at least explore the opportunity and at least give myself a chance to pursue it.
And how do you measure success for yourself when you don't have somebody giving you a promotion or, again, going to a more prestigious company? Obviously, there's straightforward numbers as far as how your business is going or how many downloads your podcast has, but I have a feeling that's probably not the only kind of qualifiers that you use to think about your success and your improvement.
I think the reason why, if someone asked me today, do you feel success or successful right now at this point in your life, I would say yes, because I constantly feel so grateful and so at peace. Sure, there are days when I feel like, oh, I need to, there are business stressors, right? There are days when you're running your own business, income is inconsistent, right? So there are months when you feel like, oh, my income isn't where I want it to be this month or last month or the past 3 months. But I still feel such a grounded sense of gratitude. And I think that stems from the fact that I really like the work that I'm doing now, today. I think I feel so grateful that I get to work on this business. I get to create things. And I have this strong belief that if I ever need to go back to look for a job because the business is not sustaining me, and of course, if need be, if I ever need to make alternative decisions just so I can continue this business or this content creation journey, then that's fine with me. And I think that's what success looks like to me, is knowing that, yes, like right now things are good and I'm loving it and I'm so proud of what I do. But if times get tough and I need to do other things just so I can continue doing this thing, that's okay too. That will still be success to me because I get to do things that I'm proud of.
I think that's why your passion for the topics and the effort and enthusiasm you have show through in the content you create, is because you do have that mentality. Going back to content creation and your podcast rebrand, which is going to be around cringy content, I don't want to take away from any of the episodes that you are going to put out later, but what are some of yours? Do you have a story about cringy content that you put out that you can share with us?
Okay, this one's funny. I remember the first brand photo shoot I ever did back in 2018. So it's not so much cringy content, but there's a common denominator here. I remember I looked at corporate like portrait photos for inspiration. Then I went into a local studio and I just got a few portraits taken. And then when I got the photos back, I saw something felt really off. I was doing all these like cross arm poses. And when I looked at the photo, I just felt I did not have the words at the time to express why something felt so weird about the photos. But I think maybe perhaps the body language I was exuding in those photos, it really doesn't represent. There's a bit of a conflict there. It wasn't expressing Cheryl's natural personality or vibe or whatever, right? And I think now if I were to do a brand photo shoot to take some pictures to use them on my website or something, I think I would be in a lot more relaxed posture or body language, or exuding different body language. So I think that's one immediate example that came to my mind, is that there's so often when we would do things or say things or write things or script things in our content because we felt like, oh, that's what successful people do. That's what's professional. And I think I have definitely tried to be professional in a lot of my content, in a lot of my early content pieces. I tried to be professional. And looking back, I'm like, like it sounds like nice words, but it's not Cheryl's words. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people is it sounds nice, right? The things that you write, it sounds nice, but it doesn't feel like you. So I think that's where we ourselves cringe, right? We ourselves as a writer or creator, we feel like something's off. And maybe to the outsider's point of view, maybe they can tell, maybe they cannot, but you can tell. And I think that's one thing that came up a lot for me was I tried to be professional in so many of my content, even in the photo shoots I did. Cross arms, like I don't cross my arms in any photos, right? And so like, I just laugh when I think back on those photos.
Thanks for sharing. I'm definitely looking forward to listening to your new episodes coming up. It sounds like you had a pretty international family that's lived in a variety of places. We're in the holiday season here, and I wanted to ask you about traditions. Is that something I've been thinking a lot about recently, having a young daughter, creating new traditions as a family? Like, for example, this year we had to decide how we were going to do the presents for Christmas Eve and Christmas. Growing up, we always did presents from extended family, grandparents, aunts and uncles on Christmas Eve all together. And then Christmas morning was for just our family, the four of us. And we opened the nice presents from our parents. But we can't do that because we don't have that extended family in Singapore. So it's these little things that, example, both for things, another example is for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Traditionally, every year I cook, I do my best to cook a Thanksgiving dinner. And as our family has gotten bigger and we've moved to different places, sometimes there's a turkey, sometimes there's a chicken, but at least it's something that represents Thanksgiving dinner. But this year, our apartment doesn't have an oven. So I couldn't do a Thanksgiving dinner. For those of you who don't know, almost all of the dishes at Thanksgiving need to go in the oven. So I couldn't even do a pumpkin pie. I did a no-bake pumpkin pie, which didn't really turn out that great. But I'm wondering how you feel, because you're also in a mixed cultural family with your husband being Singaporean. So how do you guys deal with traditions and holidays and that sort of thing?
My husband has 3 siblings, so there's 4 of them. I'm an only child. And most of his family are in Singapore. His parents are in Singapore. 2 of his siblings are in Singapore. A lot of his relatives are in Singapore. Whereas for me, it's only me in Singapore. And so for the past few years, I constantly felt it's like a sense of guilt or even worry of what if something happens to my parents? What am I going to do? Am I going to uproot everything and move back and be with my family? Like there's still a lot of questions on my mind that I don't have an answer to. I don't have a plan yet. Nothing has happened yet. Nothing major in my family has happened, but there will come a time when things happen. And these are conversations that I think are worthwhile for me to start thinking about. But I have been experiencing, especially during holiday season, where it's darn, like, should I be over there with my parents celebrating with them? What about my family in Canada? Should I be over there more often? My grandparents, 3 of my grandparents are still around right now. And they're in different countries. 1 is in Hong Kong, 2 are in Vancouver. How am I going to spread myself in different places on the same day at the same time? Impossible. So I constantly feel this like urgency of I need to be here. I need to go visit here. I need to go visit there. I need to see my family here and there. So I definitely have had a lot of mixed feelings during holiday seasons, during Christmas, for example, during Chinese New Year, for example, I have a lot of mixed feelings. So far, I have spent 2 Chinese New Years in Singapore. And this upcoming one, I'm going to go to Vancouver to see my grandparents, my paternal grandparents. So I think one thing because right now we don't have children, human children, we have cats, but not human children. So I think the balance I've arrived at is maybe every other year, I'll go here and then I'll go here with my in-laws. And I'll go with my own family, then I'll go with my in-laws. So I think that has been a balance that I have been starting to play around with. It does cost money to fly around, but it is a investment I'm willing to make for sure. But in the meantime, I'm grateful that we live in the technology era where we can call and WhatsApp and FaceTime our parents and family elsewhere. I'm very grateful for that. But I think this season, these holiday seasons have brought about a lot of self-created guilt and a lot of mixed feelings, sometimes even pain and grief. I'm not going to lie. I think it does come up for me. And I wonder, as my family gets older and aging happens even more rapidly, I wonder if these feelings will get even more intensified for me. Story for maybe in the future. We can revisit this later. But right now, I think I'm trying to find a balance.
Yeah, that I didn't even think about that challenge because for my wife and I, we come from different cultures. So I have to learn how to celebrate Chinese New Year with her. She has to learn how to celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving and 4th of July with me. But for you guys, you both want to celebrate Chinese New Year. There may be a little bit different traditions, but as you said, you can't be in more than one place at once. So that's a completely different kind of challenge that I hadn't even thought of. So I always ask my guests, we've touched on it a little bit, but if we look back from, let's say, 5 years in the future, what would you say will have made the upcoming 5 years successful for you? What are some things you would like to reflect back on and say that you did over those 5 years?
I am surprised that this is my answer, and it's not just because we literally just touched on this 2 minutes ago with the family conversation, but I think my genuine answer is that I have made the efforts. Obviously, there are physical constraints, right? I cannot be at different places at the same exact time, but I want to look back at the past 5 years and say that I have really made all the efforts I can to spend time with my loved ones and cats. Because right now, this year has been especially hard for one of my elder senior cats. She has been in a lot of pain this year because of some spine injury. Realizing that whether it's humans or pets, whoever your loved ones are, I think and I think in the past few years as well, like past 3-4 years, I made several personal decisions because of family, right? I quit the PhD because I wanted to be with my partner, right? So I'm starting to see that although when I was younger, I thought that career was the only thing I cared about. Now, as I'm aging and maturing, I've seen that the people, the loved ones in my life, cats also, they really drive a lot of the decisions I make. So I think that even more than ever in the next 5 years, being there and having quality memories with loved ones, I think will matter even more than ever. Past few years, yes. Next 5 years, yeah, even more.
That's a great one. I think back to some of my family members who are not with us anymore, and you definitely can feel regret sometimes that I was too young to appreciate as much as I should have having the opportunity to spend time with them during that point. And once there's only so much time that everybody has, so you definitely need to make the most of it. I think that's a fitting place to end our conversation. Thanks so much for being with me here today. It's great to learn about your podcast rebrand that's coming up and the amazing stories of how you were able to transform your life and build your business and live in all kinds of cool places. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, they want to listen to your podcast, or maybe talk to you about becoming a coaching client?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram username is Cheryl Theory. That's not my last name. Theory is not my last name, but that's my Instagram handle, Cheryl Theory. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Cheryl Lau. Or you can check out the Edit History podcast, which should be live by the time this episode is out, hopefully. Edit History. is on all the podcast platforms and YouTube as well.
Awesome. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Thank you again, Cheryl. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Before We Get There with your host, Nicholas Braman. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Before We Get There Podcast. New episodes are released every Thursday morning. See you next time.